Now, the number of refugees fleeing the war in Ukraine is now reported to have topped 1.5 million. Most of the refugees have fled to neighboring Poland, Hungary, Romania and Slovakia. Amnesty International has called the Russian invasion an act of aggression, that it is a crime under international law. We speak more on this. We're joined by Amnesty International's Deputy Director of Campaigns for Eastern Europe, that's Bruce Millar. He joins us from London. Bruce, thank you very much for availing yourself this afternoon. So you speak of the military intervention appearing to meet the definition of aggression under the Rome Statute of the ICC. What does it say?
What does the ICC say?
Yes, please.
Well, the UN has rules, and those rules define members of the United Nations and how they can behave. And the pursuit of disagreement or conflict between states should be resolved peacefully. It should be resolved diplomatically, and it should not be resolved by military invasion. So this action by Russia is really a direct contravention of those ideals and those principal founding elements of the United Nations.
You have characterized this as the worst such catastrophe in recent European history. From the work that you do as we speak about the displacement of people, what are you witnessing? What are you hearing? What are people telling you?
Well, I mean, we've seen an escalating situation, a human rights catastrophe. We're seeing increased disregard for civilians, civilian life, built-up areas being destroyed. As you pointed out, we're seeing a mass movement of people, both within Ukraine and outside Ukraine. You said 1.5 million already. I think estimates go as high as 4 million. The whole country is being impacted by this, and international law says that the rules of war, they should be targeting military targets. They should take every possible care around civilians. We are not seeing that. People are telling us, I've spoken to Ukrainian colleagues in Ukraine, Ukrainians who are describing absolutely horrific scenarios. We're speaking to people in cities under attack, without heating, Mariupol, without food, without water, 2 failed humanitarian corridors already, where people have tried to flee and suddenly found themselves facing a barrage of explosive weapons. I mean, this situation isn't getting any better. It's a human rights catastrophe. It's a humanitarian catastrophe. We're seeing the border, people fleeing from the country. Amnesty welcomed the European Union's Temporary Protection Directive that was triggered 3 days ago, which allows Ukrainian citizens to reside in the EU. But we're seeing discriminatory practices there in Ukraine of non-Ukrainian nationals who are not finding it as easy to exit the country. And Amnesty would ask the Ukrainian border to expedite and make crossing that border simpler, and that's for everybody trying to leave Ukraine for their safety.
And in terms of the work you do, again, what is it that you are hearing coming out of Russia? The last couple of pictures that we were able to see before we were not, before a number of countries imposed I can't even find the word. Before we were not even able to see images coming out of Russia, we saw a number of Russians taken to the streets and they were then dealt with. What are you hearing about ordinary Russians?
Well, what we hear in Russia is a mixed picture. I think depending on the access to the information that Russian civilians have, dictates their behaviour. Not everybody who understands fully what's going on in Ukraine is going to rush out into the streets and protest, but we see lots that are protesting in Russia, and we're seeing standard treatment of those people. Frankly, we're seeing the police cracking down on protest. We're seeing beatings. We're seeing detentions where people who are peacefully protesting against this military invasion are being dragged away and put in Russian prisons. So that is nothing new in Russia. The right to protest in Russia has been effectively outlawed now for years. And even one person on their own in Russia protesting against something, peacefully standing there, contravenes Russian law and is stopped. So these people are taking a risk. They obviously feel very strongly about what's happening, but the Russian government's response is unfortunately not surprising and predictable. And I would really hope that they can show restraint with any further protests that we see there.
What have you made of the latest announcement from the International Criminal Court saying that they are endeavoring to launch an investigation into, human rights abuses and war crimes?
Well, of course, Amnesty would welcome any impartial investigation into what's happening there. It's a difficult thing to do. Evidence has to be found. There are lots of political obstacles to get through, but we do occasionally see success from the International Criminal Court. So we would encourage any kind of independent investigation into this, and hopefully it goes ahead, and hopefully they get the facts, and hopefully they proceed accordingly. But from Amnesty's position, we are seeing contraventions of international humanitarian law, the rules of war. They're described as, specific types of banned weapons landing on schools. And these kind of things, if proven, can lead to further action with the ICC. So let's see what happens, but Amnesty welcomes the intent.
Just maybe if you could give us a sense of how Londoners have reacted. So I think it's in Canada, it's in Argentina, if I'm not mistaken, where people took to the streets on the weekend in solidarity with the people of Ukraine.
Yeah, well, it's the same here in the UK. I saw big crowds in the middle of London in Trafalgar Square protesting there. Many Ukrainian flags, and I know that Amnesty members and colleagues went there to speak out against the human rights violations that we're seeing, and I think there is a lot of support here for the people of Ukraine and what's happening. From all the aspects I've discussed already, they see a lot of suffering, they see a lot of bad things happening, and I think. For most people, it's very difficult to know what to do, how to support the people of Ukraine. And one thing that people can and do is go onto the street and kind of show their support. So, I don't think London or Britain is any different in that regard, and I think that general popular support will continue.
Amnesty International Director of Campaigns for Eastern Europe, Bruce Millar, thank you very much for availing yourself.